So I want to know like what was what was the Toronto music scene like in the 90's because
Oh man, it was
it's it's a whole different thing now because like Toronto's popping now all over and uh Drake has really kind of like opened up a lot of doors for Canada and stuff like that. But
yes, he has.
what was the Toronto scene like in the 90's?
Um, the Toronto scene. I can't speak for the whole scene, but in terms of R&B soul, it was. I think the '90s opened the door for artists like Drake and The Weeknd and Alyssa Cara. Because we're going back to the '90s. We're talking Julie Black. We're talking
Yeah.
Glenn Lewis. We're talking Deborah Cox. We're talking Simone Denny. We're talking Carlos Morgan. We're talking Chris Rouse, Trevor Annan. Um, we're talking groups like In Essence. Um, Out of In Essence, we have Drew Grange and Sean Jones. We're talking Divine Brown, Wade O'Brown. There were so many talented artists in the '90s, and then those artists, the names artists I just named, we are on the shoulders of artists from the '80s that you don't hear of, like you may not hear of Errol Starr or Billy Newton Davis, or you have George St. Kitts, R.B. Mann, Liberty Silver, Vivian Williams. There's just so many. Um, but yeah, back in the '90s, it was when the the scene started to open up, right? So when Drake came out, and again, he went to the States, and that was a smart thing. And I always say I should have left it. I should have stayed in the States myself instead of coming back here. But that's the choice I made. That's the decision that I made to stay in Canada. However, Drake was, coming up, as a young kid, listening to artists in hip hop like Cardinal Official, Socrates, Choclair,
Yeah.
um, um, oh, who else? Maestro was still around.
Yeah.
Um, um, the Circle, which include the Rascals from out west.
Rascals. Yeah.
Right? There are so many great artists in hip
Yeah.
hop and R&B
Trust.
that
I had him on the
were
show.
right. So even Justin Bieber, although he was a baby maybe at the time, I think it was probably
Yeah.
less than 10 years old back in the '90s. But you know what? That's the thing I always say to artists, especially artists, black artists or artists performing R&B, hip hop, R&B, soul, and hip hop coming out of Canada, is to look back at the artists who laid the foundation
Definitely.
for the artists that are coming out now, right? So I hear Drake always shouting out Toronto, right?
Mhm.
I don't hear much about The Weeknd or Lisa Cara and a lot of artists that are coming out now that they may shout out Canada or they may shout out Toronto. But me personally, yeah, I'll say, big up to Drake. But Drake wouldn't have got to where he is if the foundation wasn't built back in the '90s by the Choclairs and the Cardinal Officials and the Socrates or the Rascals or the group Their Circles, the hip hop, and Michi Me and Maestro on the hip hop side. Then you got on the R&B side, you got Deborah Cox, Glenn Lewis, Carlos Morgan, Simone Denny,
Yeah.
so many.